just to introduce this conversation, as an anti-racist and feminist and anti-capitalist activist and thinker, how do you understand and explain Donald Trump's election in the US?
Well, first of all, it was a major shock because everyone, including Trump himself, I think, had been expecting a Hillary Clinton victory. The lessons of this election are, first of all, that we underestimated the powerful ideological appeal of racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, xenophobia. At the same time, I think it's very important to point out that Trump was not elected by the majority of the people. As a matter of fact, almost 2 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Donald Trump. It's only because of the obsolete institution of the Electoral College that privileged the slave states at its founding and still privileges those states that are rural and largely white populations. But then on the other hand, vast numbers of people did not vote. 46 point some odd percent of the eligible voters did not vote. And that had to do in part with what I see as the bankruptcy of the two-party system. Both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are deeply tied to capitalist corporations. I would have preferred the election of Hillary Clinton, but she was not a candidate whom I could truly support. First of all, because of her ties to corporate capitalism. Second of all, because of her inability to understand the importance of the new feminisms that have developed. And I'm speaking about this evening, she relied on an obsolete notion of feminism that is based primarily on a kind of categorical notion of woman that is clandestinely racialized as white and classed as middle class. It's a bourgeois feminism that has not spoken to the majority of people, much less the majority of women. And the feminisms that I think are most vital and most vibrant today are the anti-racist, anti-capitalist, anti-homophobic, internationalist, Marxist-inflected feminisms. I think she could have learned a great deal from the notion of intersectionality. And she represented herself as the feminist hero who would finally break the glass ceiling. But in my opinion, that is not what feminist struggles are about. They're not about moving into the sectors of power, whether it's economic power or political power. It's about transforming the society, and not only with respect to gender, but also with respect to racism and Islamophobia. And so, yeah, she was not my candidate, but I argued that people needed to vote for her in order to create the space for radical organizing over the next period.
Still, don't you think that she was not elected also because she was a woman?
I think that the influence of misogyny is still quite powerful, and that certainly had a great deal to do with it. But at the same time, something like 94% of black women voted for Hillary Clinton. Not so much because they thought that she was the answer, but because they recognized the complexities of the electoral politics. 53% of white women voted for Trump. And so, in a sense, you could say the pull of white supremacy is greater than the commitment to feminist change.
When we read interviews of women who had voted for Trump, some of them were quoted as saying, "I'm not afraid of Trump. So as a woman, I don't have any trouble voting for him because I don't need protection and I can deal with that kind of character and sexist character and so on." Isn't it, in a way, a failure of feminism?
Well, that feminism, which is unfortunately, I think, the feminism that Hillary Clinton represented, is a narrow feminism. And it speaks to women of a certain class. It doesn't speak to white working class women. And I think many of those women could not be convinced by Hillary Clinton's argument. And I think it was a failure to recognize what we now call the intersectionality of issues. So it wasn't only and not primarily a question of women, but it was a question of the ways in which gender is always in an interrelationship with race and class and sexuality and nation. And so the question of immigration, that is also a woman's question. That's a feminist question.
Why?
It's a feminist question because feminists, in my opinion, the feminism with which I identify, recognizes that justice is indivisible, that it is not possible to seek justice for one group without justice, for all people who, suffer under the various kinds of injustices in our society. And so immigration is a feminist issue. Islamophobia is a feminist issue. Racism writ large, anti-Semitism. These are all issues that have to be confronted by feminisms. And a feminism that refuses to address those issues is more than likely ensconced in various versions of racism and class ideologies.
What is your analysis in all on the Barack Obama's presidency?
Well, presidents as individuals never have nearly as much power as is imagined. And for me, the real power of the Obama presidency did not reside in the individual Barack Obama, but rather in the movement that emerged, that made it possible for him to be elected. The mistake was not to continue that movement, and not to continue that movement in such a way that might have pressured Obama to take more radical positions than he did. Barack Obama was the president of the United States of America, and the militarists, the racists, the imperialist United States of America. But on the other hand, I think that the 8 years of the Obama administration created a kind of openness. It allowed for the emergence of the Occupy movement. I can't imagine that new anti-capitalist movement emerging under a Republican. Before the encampments had been established, they probably would have been destroyed by the police. And also the new anti-racist movements, the new Black Lives Matter movements. As critical as people are of the presidency of Obama, I think it's important to point out that the administration created the space for the emergence of such movements. And I see changes emanating from these movements, not so much only from the power of the vote, but rather to the power of people when they come together and make demands for justice in dramatic and powerful ways.
Would you see in France some kind of affiliation with, some groups here, with, the kind of politics you're talking about?
Well, I have been traveling to France for a very, very long time. France was the first country outside of the United States I visited. And I majored in French literature and studied French literature and culture, and very much felt seduced by the culture of France. But I also learned internationalism in France, because my first trip to Paris, I came expecting, I always point out, liberté, égalité, fraternité, but it was at the height of the Algerian Revolution. And so I thought I was visiting a country that had overcome racism. And, I discovered different kinds of racisms. And I also discovered internationalism, which was very important for me. And so my solidarities in France have always been with those who are, challenging capitalism and racism. Personally, I can say that I don't think the movement around the demand for my own freedom would have been as powerful as it became without the participation of French youth and French people, the French Communist Party, the communist youth.
Anti-colonization movements.
Yes, yes. And I'm saying that I am very much connected to this country precisely because I don't think I would be free today had it not been for that work. But at the same time, I see the racism in France. I see the Islamophobia, the anti-immigrant sentiments. And so my solidarities are with those who are challenging. I have problems with the way the notion of laïcité has been transformed into a weapon against Muslims, and with the way in which there is a conflation of terrorism and Islam that unfortunately is very reminiscent of the kind of appeal that Donald Trump used.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.